Lesson 13, Complex and Compound Sentences. Look at this sentence. I closed my ears because the dog was barking. It is of 1 because 4 tens combination. The dog was barking and I closed my ears. That is of 4 and 1 tens combination. Let's take the second clause of each of these sentences. Because the dog was barking and I closed my ears. We have to learn something more about these two clauses before we go further. If a clause starts with a word like when, because, after, etc., that leaves the thought unfinished, answers a WH question, it's a dependent clause. Because the dog was barking, this is a dependent clause. If a clause is a complete sentence, starts with words like and, but, etc., does not answer a WH question as a whole, it is an independent clause. I close my ears is an independent clause. If a sentence has a clause that answers a WH question, it is a complex sentence. Let's read this sentence. I closed my ears because the dog was barking. This is a complex sentence because the clause because the dog was barking answers the WH question why and it is incomplete. So this is a complex sentence. If a sentence has a clause that does not answer a WH question, it is a compound sentence. The dog was barking and I closed my ears. This is a compound sentence because the clause and I close my ears does not answer a WH question and it makes sense and it is a complete sentence. Let's look at a complex and a compound sentence. I closed my ears because the dog was barking. This is a complex sentence. Let's chunk it. I closed my ears because the dog was barking. 4 chunks. So 4 questions should be possible. Did you close your ears because the dog was barking? Who closed your ears because the dog was barking? What did you close because the dog was barking? Why did you close your ears? So all these 4 questions will have only one answer. Let's look at the next sentence. The dog was barking and I closed my ears. It's a compound sentence. Let's chunk it. The dog was barking, the first clause, and I closed my ears, the second clause. The total number of questions depend on the number of chunks in the first clause and the second clause. The multiple of those two clauses will give us the total number of questions. Was the dog barking and did you close your ears? Yes, no question of the first clause and the second clause. Was the dog barking and who closed your ears? Yes, no question of the first clause and who question of the second clause. Was the dog barking and what did you close? Yes, no question of the first clause and what question of the second clause. What was barking and did you close your ears? What question of the first clause and yes, no question of the second clause. What was barking and who closed your ears? What question of the first clause and who question of the second clause. What was barking and what did you close? What question of the first and the second clause. All these clauses will have two answers. Example, was the dog barking and who closed your ears? Yes, the dog was barking and I closed my ears. More about a compound sentence and the maximum number of positive questions. The dog was barking loudly and I closed my ears. The dog was barking loudly, 3 chunks, and I closed my ears. So 9 questions should be possible. Now here I am not going to tell you the question of the first clause and the question of second clause, you can just observe. Was the dog barking loudly and did you close your ears? Was the dog barking loudly and who closed your ears? Was the dog barking loudly and what did you close? What was barking loudly and did you close your ears? How was the dog barking and did you close your ears? What was barking loudly and who closed your ears? What was barking loudly and what did you close? How was the dog barking and who closed your ears? How was the dog barking and what did you close? Hope you understand how to form questions from a compound sentence. Pause this video, read all these sentences and make them or change them into yes, no and WH questions. Thank you. See you in the next lesson. Until then, watch these videos at least twice a day. In the next lesson, we will be discussing about the usage of tenses.